Yeah, so I think we have gone live on Facebook and viewers. It's been a very interesting few months for us, doing a lot of interactions online. And today we go on to an entirely new subject on this session of Fast&Up Facebook Live. The subject is clean nutrition in sports, a subject which a lot of people are aware of but have very little knowledge when it comes to practicality. So I'm very happy to have with us two people who I would call experts or people who know more about the subject. One is Dr. Abhijit Salvi, who obviously is an MBBS doctor, masters in sports and exercise medicine. He has also been a sports physician at the Maharashtra Cricket Association in the past, and he currently has roles in the BCCI, which extends from anti-doping to age verification, which is again a very interesting subject, which I would probably request him to come on live sometime later. So thank you, Dr. Abhijit, for taking out time to be here.
Thank you, Vijay.
Yeah, and we also have a good friend of ours from UK, Mr. Terence from LGC. LGC is more well known in the sporting world through the informed sport and informed choice certifications that the company provides. Terence himself has been in the advising industry into sports, anti-doping, on the safe use of supplements since joining International Life Sciences Group of LGC in 2013, and currently manages the informed sport and informed choice testing and certification programs in Asia, Europe, and Africa. He developed his expertise in anti-doping while working with WADA, which we will talk about, in Montreal, where he managed media relations and communications, including for the Lance Armstrong doping scandal and WADA's media strategy for the London 2012 Olympic Games, which again is a very interesting thing because of the recent news item which came about the 2012 London Olympics. Prior to that, he worked for several international sports organizations covering a gamut of things. So Terence, welcome. I think it's the first time that you are talking to an Indian audience.
Thank you, Vijay. It's great to be here, and I look forward to discussing all matters relating to clean nutrition and explaining what we do at LGC with the Informed Sport program.
Great. And for the viewers, we are doing this first time for me is through StreamYard, and we are doing it live into possibly Facebook and YouTube. So I can actually get comments from the viewers right here, which I can post to the audience as and when we get the questions. So it's a very interesting model out here. So to get started, we have roughly around an hour or so. So to get started with Dr. Abhijit, let us first talk about what do you mean by clean nutrition in sports?
Well, before I talk about clean nutrition, let's talk about what's a good nutrition. As with athletes and non-athletes or the general population, having a good diet, having a good nutrition is vital for a healthy well-being. So a good nutrition plan would have your carbohydrates, proteins, fats in necessary amounts. And a good nutrition would also mean that you eat more natural foods like whole fruits or vegetables, lean protein, micronutrients, whatever required. But when it comes to clean nutrition, a good, as I said, a good nutrition would entail eating natural foods, but it does not mean replacing a normal meal with your commercially available, say, meal replacements. So you don't skip a normal meal and go and buy commercially available, say, energy bars or meal replacement shakes and all, and replace that your normal food. So having a good meal is vital. And coming to clean nutrition, so we all know that athletes do require nutrition plays a small but vital part in performance of athletes, especially the elite ones. And
Right.
the nutrition supplements which are available in the market, these contribute towards that part of success as well in the nutrition. So there are a lot of supplements available in the market, but athletes would not know which ones to take. They should consult. A lot of times what happens, especially in my experience, I would say a lot of times what happens is athletes are told by their coaches, their doctors, or the medical staff to take a particular, say, glutamine. A lot of times athletes do not ask questions. They think that if the support coaches are telling me to take this, then they have to take it to be successful. But athletes should be aware of what they are eating. They should ask questions on what is the necessity. If I have to say, if someone advises me to take glutamine, athletes should be able to ask, why glutamine? Is it not available in normal foods that I eat? Is it, if I eat it, what will it do to my body?
Right.
Which athletes need to ask. And then depending on, they should consult a specialist as well, say a nutritionist. I'm not an expert in nutrition, but then there are plenty of nutritionists available these days. So they should consult and eat a balanced diet.
Right. Abhijit, I fully agree with you that we have set the ball rolling in saying that it's always advisable to have real food. But when it comes to elite athletes and a lot of fitness enthusiasts, you might want to. I think we have lost Dr. Abhijit, but we'll still continue, Terence, and we'll hope that he comes back.
Sure.
But he has explained that we need clean nutrition. My next question, Terence, especially to you, would be when it comes to clean nutrition, there's often a lot of supplements involved, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what has been your experience? You have worked extensively with companies, you have extensively worked with multiple countries. So what constitutes clean nutrition? And then maybe we can spend some time on what LGC or informed sport or informed choice later.
Sure. Thank you, Vijay. I mean, I think it's important to re-stress what yourself and Dr. Abhijit said about how the most important thing is to have a balanced and healthy diet to start with. And I think that is the sensible approach that which all doctors, nutritionists, managers, trainers, performance directors, they will always recommend that approach first. So it's food first, and then if there are some benefits to supplementing your diet with sports nutrition and sports supplements, then this is where the athletes have to start being careful and taking the advice as to what supplements are actually going to be effective for them. I think a good place to start off with it is by stressing that the large majority of athletes, and in particular elite athletes, they do take some form of sports supplements these days. They take it to aid their training, to help their recovery, and to help with their performance. And because supplements are so widely used nowadays, it is very important that athletes make sure that they are taking supplements which have been tested for substances which are banned in sport, but also supplements which have been certified to show that they are manufactured to high quality standards. Across the world, on a regular basis, athletes are failing doping tests because of contaminated products. We know this because there is significant evidence. I believe in India recently there was a case of some under 18 rowers who I believe 22 of them tested positive, and they are blaming a contaminated supplement for that. So it's an issue which is affecting sports and athletes across the world. I've been involved in anti-doping now for almost a decade, and the issue has not got any better because because of the wide use of supplements. So it's very important for athletes to make sure that if they are going to use a supplement, that supplement has been tested and it's certified on a program like Informed Sport. If they do not do that due diligence, if they do not check, and if that supplement then was to cause any sort of violation in doping, then they do not have any recourse or any defense under the World Anti-Doping.
Right. So we will kind of elaborate on that a little bit further when we talk a little bit further. So thank you. I mean, it's good to have Abhijit back. I think there was a small problem with the internet at his end. So thank you getting back. So Abhijit, we actually went from good nutrition to clean nutrition, and Terence was explaining the issue of contamination, etc. So would you be able to throw a little bit of light on that aspect when it comes to, well, I need glutamine. The nutritionist has told me to take glutamine. But after that, what? After that, what is the check that one should have, and where the role of a clean nutrition comes in?
Right. So, as I said, first of all, whenever all athletes should remember that whenever they are asked to take any supplements, dietary supplements, these usually could be, say, for energy purpose or for any micronutrient deficiency or macronutrient deficiencies, and some supplements would promise, say, performance enhancement. So generally, athletes, as a first step, athletes should consult an expert, say a nutritionist, to see. First of all, they should get a blood test done or their body evaluation done to see whether they lack those nutrients. A lot of times, what I've seen is multivitamins, iron is rampantly prescribed to all athletes, but overdosing. If your body has normal levels of say vitamin B12 or say vitamin D, overdosing your body is not going to help. It has adverse effects as well. Say even your protein, the average requirement, I believe, is 1.2 to 2 grams in athletes for daily, 1.2 to 2 grams per day in elite athletes. 1.2 to 2 per kg of body weight. Yes. But then I've seen athletes taking multiple scoops of protein shakes, which is again going to harm their kidneys. It is going to overload their kidneys. So as a first step, they should consult the experts and see whether they need those supplements or dietary additional supplements in their bodies. If they do, then ideally what practice we follow or I follow is, because there are very few supplements which one can guarantee the safety of those supplements. So I generally refer to Informed Sport or Informed Choice. India does not have any testing agency, but then UK Anti-Doping and US Anti-Doping Agency, they rely on Informed Sport and Informed Choice. Besides, US Anti-Doping Agency also relies on NSF tested products. Plus, Australia has an agency which is called HASTA. So usually what I follow is I check these supplements, whether they are tested by these 4 agencies. And if they have been tested, match the batch numbers which have been tested. If it is tested, then I would advise the athlete. End of the day, responsibility lies on the athlete. I mean, even Informed Sport would say they do not provide 100% guarantee of any supplement. So even after testing, there is no 100% guarantee. So end of the day, responsibility lies with the athlete. So, but at least taking a tested product ensures that there's a 95 to 99% safety aspect, that supplement does not contain a prohibited substance. So usually I advise athletes to take a supplement which has been tested by one of these 4 agencies.
Sure. I mean, very interesting insight, Dr. Abhijit. For the viewers, please go ahead, type in your questions on Facebook, and we will get the experts to answer. So Terence and Abhijit, just to give you an anecdote from my own experience. when we talked about products which athletes should use, I think a very pertinent point that Abhijit made was the final responsibility of the use of the ingredient or product lies with the athlete. So no agency or authority in the world can guarantee that for the athlete. So I think the point that Dr. Abhijit has put in is very nice, saying that the final decision has to be taken by the athlete, but they all have the wherewithal or the parameters by which they can actually decide what is a good nutrition supplement to have. And because I see a lot of athlete contracts where lawyers come in and say that there should be an indemnification clause put in, etc. But I think even by the Olympic rules or the world standards, the final authority, the final call has to be taken by the athlete, which is a great point that Abhijit raised. Thank you.
Yeah, that's very true. I think what you're referring to is it's called strict liability. The World Anti-Doping Code, which is, in simple terms, it's like the rule book for athletes for Olympic sports and many other sports. That is the principle that underlines the World Anti-Doping Code is one of strict liability. So every athlete is responsible for what they put in their body. They cannot blame anybody else. It is down to them. Now, the latest version of the World Anti-Doping Code, it does recognize that there are some risks associated with contaminated products. And this is under Article 10.5, and it relates to no significant fault or negligence. And so it's very important that an athlete, in order to be able to be covered by that article of the code, they make sure they do their due diligence in terms of looking at what they are putting in their body. Now, when it comes to supplements, there are some very simple steps, which I'm sure Ananjit tells his athletes. First, make sure the product is certified on a program like Informed Sport. Secondly, cross-reference the batch number of the products that you are using. Cross-reference it to the website for Informed Sport and make sure that particular batch has been tested. They can go even further. They can take screen grabs or photographs of this on their mobile phone. And the best advice is then for them to enter this information on their doping control form. So there is an actual section on the form where they can put what supplements they've been using and what batch numbers. So if at any stage that supplement was responsible for your doping violation, you can say to the tribunal, I did everything in my power to make sure that this supplement was clean, that it had been tested, that particular batch had been tested. Now, another important part of Article 10.5 also is that the athlete has to show that the products and the batch they have taken is actually contaminated. So the burden of proof is actually on the athletes, even more so here. So the great thing about Informed Sport is that for every sample that we test, for every batch we test, we keep a secure sample stored in our facility. So that if an athlete had to go back and test that batch again, we can do it for them and then hopefully show them that there was contamination. Though I must also add that in 12, 13 years that Informed Sport has been going, not one product has been involved in any sort of doping violation. So we're fairly confident we're getting it right. And I also very much agree with Dr. Abhijit's comment about there are no 100% guarantees. Although, as I said, our products have not yet been involved in any sort of violation. We're a very professional and honest laboratory, and we make it very clear to athletes and to the industry that we're only testing a small sample. There are hundreds and hundreds of banned substances in the prohibited list. We cannot test for all of them because it is just not possible. And also the WADA list includes phrases such as compounds with a similar chemical structure to. So that's like a catch-all phrase. If there is a compound out there that the World Anti-Doping Agency doesn't know about, but it has that molecular structure, it is still prohibited. So we obviously cannot test for these these substances which we don't know exist. So, but we're fairly certain we're doing a good job. It's very unlikely a product would get onto our program if there were any risks in terms of the ingredients, the formulation, the manufacturing process.
In fact, I would like, sorry, Vijay, I just like to come in. In fact, it's good to know, Terence, that you actually keep that sample with you, because
Absolutely.
most often what I've noticed is once an athlete gives a sample, it goes to the lab. It takes a while. In fact, usually takes a month or 2 months until the National Anti-Doping Organization comes back to the athlete saying you've tested positive. And,
Sure.
and by that time, in a couple of months or even a month's time, that batch or that supplement, the athlete would have finished and he would have just binned that container. So it's good to know that you actually keep the sample. So that would be good.
Yeah. I mean, if I can just give a little bit of an explanation behind that, the Informed Sport program was it was developed with the support of UK anti-doping back in 2008 and also Dutch anti-doping agency, and it was designed very much with athletes in mind. That there are other programs out there which possibly have a bit more focus on the food regulation and standards and things like that. Informed Sport was very specific to the athlete, and we knew that they would have to have access to another sample in order to be able to protect themselves. So, but those steps in terms of Article 10.5 of the World Anti-Doping Code, I encourage all the sports and anti-doping agencies that I speak to make their athletes aware of that. If they know that they are protected by taking certain steps, then they seem to be much more engaged with the process.
Right. Great points, both of you. I think I would like to add to what both of you said in terms of the sample. So all good companies should be keeping control samples of whatever they have produced, right? For a period of, I'm not a quality person, but typically for a time of 3 years or 5 years, they typically should be having control samples in their lab. So
Sure.
technically, if there is a reason, one should be able to either go to Informed Sport or any such agency, and also go to the company and probably ask them, show me that sample, I want to test that out and see if it is having the same contamination or not.
Sure.
But having said that, Abhijit, I would like to come back to you again in a country like India. I mean, you come from a rich sport, cricket, right? But a lot of other sports don't have access in terms of money, resources, etc. So this session is not just about cricket. I mean, we are also talking about sports in general. So there are companies which have the wherewithal to actually go and get themselves tested with, say, an Informed Sport or a BSCG or NSF. Yeah. So in your experience, have you come across companies which don't have these certifications, and for whatever reason you have to go with them, right? And if that happens, do you do any due diligence from your end, or have you seen anything like that happening with the support system or staff in India?
See, first of all, let me correct you. Although cricket must be a rich game, but not all cricketers are rich. I mean, with so many cricketers in the country, a lot of them come from varied financial right. backgrounds. So, sorry for the lights. So what happens is, a lot of times, obviously, I work with the cricket board, and the cricket board doesn't procure products for the players. All players procure their own products. Sure. Maybe the state boards or the BCCI would buy electrolytes for the players. That's the most. But otherwise, whatever whey proteins and creatines, it's the individual responsibility of the players to buy it themselves. So what I've seen is a lot of these products are not tested, especially the ones available in India, except barring a few of them, or maybe even just a couple. I would go to the extent of saying just a couple of products, and most of them would be from Fast&Up. But most of the products are not tested. So they have to athletes have to rely on tested products, which are all international brands, and then they're expensive. Sure. My biggest challenge is explaining to athletes that buy a supplement from a verified authorized reseller, if I have to use the correct term, authorized reseller. In India and a lot of other countries, you would find fake products being sold on online platforms. So somebody buying, say, for example, say an Optimum Nutrition product, which is made in the US, being sold online on one of the online platforms, it may be a fake product. You don't know where it's coming from. So although you might even check the batch number, it matches on Informed Sport, but you cannot be 100% sure whether it's the actual product from the company or not.
Right. No, I mean, excellent.
Yeah. So I usually encourage people or athletes to visit whichever product they're planning to buy. Just go visit the website, company's website. Each company has a list of authorized resellers in each country. So call those resellers, contact them, and pick up your products from them rather than just buying it online. Say, I would even saying buying it from Amazon or Flipkart or N number of online platforms that are available in India.
Excellent point. Before I come to Terence, I think what you're basically saying is athletes should also know the supply chain a little bit more, right? If there's a long supply chain, there is always a possibility that there could be something which comes in between. So try to understand the entire supply chain rather than just the product itself. Which raises another interesting point, Terence, because your company goes through a certification process, and I know it's a rigorous process because we have been through one. So can you explain to the audience also what constitutes a certification process, and whether it is only the manufacturing facility or whether it's only the one batch? How do you expect consistency? If you can throw a little bit of light, that will be great.
Sure. No, absolutely, Vijay. And I think that the point around supply chain is a very, very important one. Our certification process is very robust and very rigorous, and we make no excuses for this because, as I mentioned earlier on, our program is designed to protect athletes, and only by making sure that we are very strict can we provide that level of assurance. What we require from the manufacturers and the brands that produce sports supplements is complete transparency. We have to see transparency at every level of their supply chain. So during our certification process, we require them to complete a number of documents and a number of forms which give significant amount of detail on the ingredients that they're using, how the manufacturer chooses the supply of those ingredients, where does the ingredient come from. We will review those ingredients to make sure that there is no risk in terms of contamination. Vijay, you'll know this better than I, but nowadays there are a lot of supplements companies which are using very novel and quite challenging botanical type ingredients, and these ones especially are challenging. They can contain naturally occurring sterols and stimulants which throughout the manufacturing process can convert into banned substances. So we make sure at the very start that we have a clear picture of the product that is being made. We will look at the ingredients, we'll look at the formulation, and then we look at the manufacturing process. We have to see all of the SOPs of that manufacturer. And an SOP stands for Standard Operating Procedures. And that could be in terms of how they move materials into their facility, how they clean their facility, how they create segregation between certain lines of products, a whole range of things to make sure that the manufacturing of that product is meeting high regulations and quality standards. The other critical part of certification is that we have to test the product up to 5 times. We want to have a historic record of that product to make sure that there is no contamination in it before it completes certification. And 3 of those tests have to come from the first commercial sample or from a commercial sample. Only after they have been through this rigorous process, and it can take 7-8 weeks of back and forth, then submitting documents, us reviewing the documents, us making sure that any risks are actioned at their end and at our end. only then is a product allowed onto the Informed Sports program. We have quite a few products, and it may take months and months for them to come on board, because with the best will in the world, sometimes there might be 3 or 4 parties involved. We may get the information from the manufacturer, but then the packer does not provide the information, so we have to wait. It can be a little bit frustrating, but we make sure that every step is followed properly, and that we have this full transparency, as I said. The thing about manufacturing of supplements is that there are ways that contamination can be introduced into the process. And again, I mentioned ingredients. There are lots of novel ingredients these days which present risk. My colleagues in program management and within the laboratory, they review thousands of ingredients every year, and having that expertise and knowledge is quite tough. One ingredient may have 8 or 9 different names, depending which part of the world it comes from. And so it's really quite a challenge. You have to build up this huge database of information. As well as contamination can also be introduced through the manufacturing process. Some facilities may be handling prohibited substances. If they don't have in place a robust segregation process, then that contamination can easily go from one line onto the other. We test down to levels of parts per billion, so it does not take a great deal for contamination to happen and for us to see it in a test. And then, of course, there is the other way of contamination, if that's the right word for this, but there are some disreputable brands which will adulterate their products. They will spike them. They may put in a stimulant at a very low level, but that stimulant may give the end user a little lift. And so next time they say, wow, I got a kick from that supplement, I'm going to take it again. We call this spiking. Companies such as that, they never come to us because they know that we would not deal with them. But we know that those types of products, there is a market for them. There are, there's certain types of activities, maybe some types of bodybuilding where people are not worried what they put in their body. They just want to look bigger, stronger, more muscular. Again, we don't deal with those people, but there is a market for it. And we know there's evidence of these types of brands that when they're sort of written about in the press, their sales actually go up because, there are those extreme bodybuilders that want those sort of products. We don't deal with those people at all, but contamination does happen. There is unfortunately a history of contamination, and we have worked very hard with brands such as Fast&Up over the last 10 years to help them raise the standards. And there's been a lot of progress, but we still have to keep very much on the issue.
Sure. Thanks, Terence. I have 2 questions for Abhijit, one from the audience and one which I would like to ask. We have an audience question which says, does BCCI regularly circulate the list of retailers or suppliers or products which should be bought by the players? Do you have any guidance of that sort? And my follow-on question is, do you have a program, because I know cricketers come right from the state team to the national team, and then you have the women cricketers across the country, different age groups. Do you have an education policy on anti-doping which you regularly run?
Right. Answering your first question is no, because WADA does not authorize any of its labs to test any supplements and give out certificates. Likewise, none of the national anti-doping organizations would do that, and BCCI does not do it as well. As I said in the beginning, it is the responsibility lies with the players. We cannot circulate a standard list of supplements which the players can take, because some company might have tested a certain batch with Informed Sport, but then after that they discontinue testing. So it doesn't make sense in us circulating a list of supplements which are safe to take. So my advice is, whichever supplements you decide to take, it's your responsibility, but I can help you. BCCI will help you with informing you which products, which supplements in particular are tested. End of the day, decision will be yours.
Right.
Whether to take it or not take it. I've come across, there are a lot of supplements available in the market which which scream that I'm dangerous, like especially the fat burning products available in the market. Just to narrate one incident, last year, one of the athletes called me saying that there's a product, somebody told him Garcinia cambogia.
Right.
It helps burn fat. Obviously, I had never heard of this product. So I went online, did my own research, and found out that there's limited evidence supporting Garcinia cambogia's fat burning capabilities. But what had been found in research is that it causes severe liver damage. So that is what I conveyed to the player, that these are my findings. So I would suggest don't take it. But then he trusted his trainer so much that he was ready to take that risk. So he went ahead, took that product, and at the back of his mind, he remembered that I had told him it causes liver damage. So about a month after taking that product, he went ahead and did a blood test and found out that his liver had severe, all the liver markers,
Sure.
they were really bad. And that's when he got scared and then contacted me saying, sorry, I would never again go for any such products. I'll listen to you and all those things. So what my advice is, again, clean nutrition is more important. Getting enough advice from the best people in business is important.
Sure.
To your second question, yes, BCCI, we are quite serious about doping, and we want to keep the sport of cricket dope free. So every year, this year it has been affected because of COVID-19 situation, but every year before the start of the domestic season, myself and other tutors, we go around each and every state. We have 38 member states. So each and every state we visit, and all junior to senior cricketers, it's mandatory for everyone to attend these education programs. And so that's what we do every year. And we also have a pocket guide which contains the updated WADA prohibited list, as well as the basic details of anti-doping and our 24/7 helpline numbers. So that's what our education program looks like.
No, perfect. I think it's commendable that you have a policy, a structure in place to kind of educate the people, because what we have really seen is that in a lot of sports there's a rampant use of products till various age categories in India, because there's hardly any testing which happens. And then by the time you are at the senior level, when you're playing international sports, that is when you get tested, right? And then it becomes a problem.
Exactly.
Taking that question, that subject to Terence. Terence, now I want to shift the focus, because you have an expertise also from a global standpoint on doping, sports, etc. So the viewers might be interested in knowing how is a typical testing done. We are talking about in-competition testing. I would talk about out-of-competition testing, which is an interesting subject which we will address later. Mm-hmm. But how does in-competition testing happen? How many people are tested? How many samples are taken out? What is the time frame? Do you have any rough idea which you can share with people?
I can share what I know, Vijay. I'm going to be completely honest and say I've not been involved at the sort of the testing end of anti-doping since back in 2013 when I was working with WADA. I think the testing programs vary from sport to sport. It varies from sport to sport, but also from major competition to major competition. A lot of it will depend on the motivation and the resources of the anti-doping organization or the national anti-doping organization. It'll also, to a degree, depend on the degree of risk that people think exists within a certain sport. If we talk about cricket, for example, it is not traditionally seen as a sport that is high risk in terms of doping, because one, it is ubiquitous across India and other parts of the world. It's played by everybody. The types of performance enhancement that one can get from drugs possibly would not be as beneficial to cricketers as they may be for an endurance athlete or a power athlete. So it's very hard to give a sort of a one-fits-all description of what happens in doping, but certainly in terms of doping control. But certainly the sports which are considered higher risk, you can probably assume that there's more testing going on there. And the sports where there is a lot more resource, they can afford the testing. And possibly also the nations which are perhaps a little bit more developed in terms of having more wealth and resource to it, having bigger national anti-doping organizations, hopefully they will have bigger testing programs. I know there is a strong element of outer competition testing because they want to make sure that that element of surprise exists as a deterrent for athletes, and that is why they have this this function called whereabouts. So an elite athlete or an athlete in a testing pool has to give their whereabouts for every hour of the day for 365 days a year. It's quite a tough thing for the athletes to give this information, but that's a deterrent. They have to know that exists, because if they're not competing, then they may think, oh well, it's downtime, I can cheat by using performance enhancing substances. In competitions, there's no one hard and fast rule, but in some of the major tournaments or major events, they may say, okay, we're going to test one from the top three. They may say we're going to test everybody on the podium. It varies. They may want to be a little bit more haphazard or ad hoc about it and say, right, we'll test one person from the final. So there's no hard and fast rule. It does vary, but I get a sense that it is very, very challenging. Athletes, I think, are still possibly a little bit ahead of the game. There are some disreputable people out there. There's some disreputable people with expertise in pharmacy and chemistry who allow them to sort of cheat the process. It's tough. There's not a lot of funding behind anti-doping, so it's difficult. I know the anti-doping organizations put a lot of effort into education to try and show athletes that it's not in their interest to cheat through drugs, or to show them it's not in their best interest of health. But it's an ongoing issue, and it's a tough challenge, and it's probably one of those issues which will never be eradicated. I often used to say when I was at WADA that it's a little bit like speeding. You want to do your best to stop people from speeding, but you're never going to stop everybody from speeding. And if one looks at it from a sort of a values perspective, there's a lot to be gained from doing it. An athlete can become very rich from getting to the top of their sport. So the temptations are great, and it's a tough thing to challenge.
So great. Before I go to Abhijit, I just wanted to take one audience question. I mean, it's pretty much a person that I think Abhijit will know. I know very well. Anuja Dalvi, who has worked with a lot of cricket in India. She's asking specifically to Terence. This question is to you. She asked, which I think it's a very sane question, even from a company perspective, because this is something which we faced 4 years back when we started the process of getting into certifications, etc. She asked, the process of certifications from Informed Sports or any other such agency increases the price of the products, which is again passed on to the buyers. Is there a solution to this? Because there are a lot of unsponsored athletes out there, especially from the developing countries and countries like India, where cricket is one of the sports. But when you go down to various other sports like athletics, hockey, and volleyball, they are not necessarily well funded, right?
Sure.
So, would you be able to give some idea about the thought process of companies like yours?
Yes, it's. I mean, I understand that the costs involved of certifying a product and then testing it every batch can be quite significant. Again, I must go back to the point I made at the start of this webinar, that our program was designed to protect athletes, and so the only way we can do that is by having these robust requirements in place. I do appreciate sometimes with some brands that the costs are passed on to the end consumer, but I also know from having dealt with hundreds and hundreds of supplements companies from across the world that some of these companies are pretty wealthy themselves. I've been into meetings before, and the CEO may say, no, we're not paying, that's too expensive. And then I'll go into the car park and there are all sorts of fancy cars and Porsches and things like that. So I think the testing is affordable. We also have what's called a tiered structure. So the more testing a company has to do, the more competitive the pricing and the testing we can sell them. But the most important thing is, and I stress this again, our program is designed for the athletes. And if they choose to use a supplement, and if it does cost them a little bit more as a result of it being tested, I personally think this is a good investment on their behalf. Because at the end of the day, they don't want to have their careers ruined. They don't want to have their reputations ruined, or even affect the reputation of their sport.
I think a valid thing, Terence. I think one of me and I think Abhijit, we were discussing the other day when I was inviting him for this talk, that one of the solutions could be to maybe have labs or companies like Informed Choice setting up base in India, which probably lessens the process of testing and the commercial.
Sure.
And maybe more companies getting onto this program, because when more companies get into the program, automatically the costs probably go down, because I know you have a list of products, ingredients which you have to test. So it is an expensive process. And I think a very valid answer there.
It is, and your point about hopefully if the markets in certain parts of the world, if it grows, then there is hopefully the opportunity to explore having testing in that country. The only thing I will say is Informed Sport has laboratories currently in the UK, but also in the USA. The sort of science we perform is very high end. It's very niche. It does require a significant capital investment. Some of the instruments we use are £500,000 to purchase, and then expensive to operate. And so to set up that sort of testing facility is not something which is very easy or affordable. However, we get your point. If the Indian market was to grow significantly, then this would be something that LGC, I hope, would look at in due course.
Fair answer, Terence. We'll go on to Dr. Abhijit. Doctor, now that this is a COVID time, so a lot of people are not really in competition. It's an off-season time, right? And I think Terence did mention the subject of the whereabouts clause. And I also know that even in India, including cricketers, there are a host of people who are covered into it. I believe it is the NRTP program where 100 odd athletes are covered who have to be monitored. So can you just throw a little bit of light on what this program is about, and how are these people chosen? I mean, the 100 athletes, how are they chosen, and what is the time frame during which they stay under this program? And also maybe throw some light on what happens to other people outside of these 100 players. Do they ever get tested, or are they okay?
So basically, NADA, the National Anti-Doping Agency, is in charge of all drug testing in India. So earlier, cricket wasn't under their purview, but since 2019, cricket is also falls under NADA's purview. So the top athletes generally in all sport, NADA prepares a list based either on their rankings, world rankings, or say national rankings, or the level of risk, because NADA also has intelligence officers who would gather information on which athletes are doping and not doping. So based on that, they prepare a list for each sport. Say some sport with the high risk sport, as Terence mentioned, cricket is a low risk sport. Cricket is more of a skill based game rather than say somebody taking drugs and performing well on the cricket field. So the high risk sport would have more athletes in that NRTP list, which is the National Registered Testing Pool. And I believe there are about 140 odd athletes in NADA's list, which NADA chooses. And this list is updated every 6 months. And all these athletes have to provide a 1 hour slot every single day when the NADA officials can contact them, go to their address, wherever, say a gym or their hotel or their home, and they can provide a sample. So NADA has that list of cricketers as well as other athletes.
Very interesting. And
testing is very expensive. Sorry to interrupt, but testing costs a lot of money. In terms of Indian rupees, to collect a sample and send it off to a lab for testing costs about 40 to 50,000 Indian rupees. So it's an expensive business. So they can't just randomly select players and test them. Of course they do. So the rest of the players, your next part of the question was, what happens to the other athletes? Of course, they do get tested as well, but they are not in NADA's registered testing pool. So maybe they won't be tested at their home or their training locations. They could be, if NADA has intelligence that they are taking prohibited medicines, then they will be tested as well. But they don't have to provide that 1 hour slot to NADA. So most likely they would be tested at any national competitions or international tournaments.
Right. One quick question, Dr. Abhijit. You said about the cost. So where does the sample go out to? Is it getting tested in India or has it to be sent abroad for testing?
Yeah. There are only, I guess, 34 WADA accredited labs around the world. There is one in India, which is in New Delhi, National Dope Testing Laboratory. Unfortunately, last year, WADA has suspended their accreditation. So currently, all samples which the National Anti-Doping Agency, NADA, collects are either being sent to Bangkok or Qatar or Belgium and other labs. So I believe WADA hasn't overruled that suspension. So currently, the NDTL is still suspended. There is one lab in India, but currently they're not testing any samples. So all samples are sent overseas for testing.
I mean, that's an interesting insight. Terence, coming to you, I just wanted to pick up on a trend where, a lot of athletes across the world and more so in India, a lot of people rely on organic food, supplements probably coming from the traditional Indian, system like Ayurveda, and, that kind of category and subject. So, in your overall list of companies across the world, do you find companies which are also going in for testing at your end, who are very maybe organic in nature, who are very plant-based, who possibly a layman would expect no contamination at all? Right? What's been your experience?
Yeah, absolutely, and it's a very good point, Vijay. I mentioned earlier on that the supplements industry is very innovative. Everybody is looking for that new ingredient, which is going to have that beneficial effect on an athlete. So yes, we receive on a regular basis, almost daily, we are having inquiries from companies which are saying we would like to introduce this new ingredient. We are developing a product around it. Some of them are completely harmless. Like there's certain berry products out there which have some great benefits. There are, there was a trend for beetroot for a period of time, and all these are pretty safe. But we get quite a few from countries like China and from India where they're quite exotic. They're quite exotic plants, and they're quite exotic, what we call botanicals. And I mentioned earlier that through the manufacturing process, some of the components of that ingredient can convert into a prohibited substance. So it is a challenge for us. I'm very thankful that I have some colleagues who are experts who have been doing this for 15 years, and that they can look at an ingredient, they can look at a name, and if they'll identify it and say, okay, we know this is a risk, and if it's a risk, we're going to do some testing, or immediately we say, no, we cannot certify it. If they don't recognize the name of a botanical or a plant-based ingredient, then that's when it triggers. We have to do a lot of research around this. So it's a challenge, it's ongoing, and it's almost like every month we come across some new stuff. One of the particular trends we have at the moment is with CBD products. As you know, CBD is become very popular in sport. Here in the UK, we have a number of quite high-profile athletes who have launched their own brand of CBD products, and apparently the benefits are it can help you with recovery from injuries, it can help you sleep, it reduces anxiety, helps prepare you for games and things like that. We don't certify CBD products on the Informed Sports or Informed Choice program for the simple reason that there has not been enough studies or research done into CBD. There is a permitted amount of THC which is allowed in CBD products, and nobody knows if an athlete was to take a certain amount of these CBD products, whether the accumulated effect would be that they had enough THC in their body to fail a test. We also know that some CBD products, for example, may be, although they may not have THC, they may have other prohibited cannabinoids in them. There's still a lot of research that has to be done around this, and so that's just one example of how the plant-based ingredients is a challenge.
Great.
I would just like to quickly come in, Vijay, because in India that's a huge challenge as well, because a lot of athletes think Ayurvedic, homeopathy, herbal medicine should be safe, but then that's what I tell them, that we cannot be the WADA prohibited list has the chemical structures of all the drugs that are banned, but we cannot say for certain. There have been athletes who have tested positive having consumed some homeopathy, Ayurveda medicines as well. So I keep telling athletes that not that just because I'm an allopathy doctor, I'm against homeopathy or Ayurveda. Obviously, it has survived thousands of years, so it must be working. But then we cannot provide you a guarantee that these are safe. So if you're taking these at your own risk. Just treat them as supplements as well, in a way.
Sure. Just to add to that as well, Vijay, we quite often have inquiries about deer antler, and they can compress this into powders and things like that, and it's a tough one because we know that they think there are benefits to it. There's a lot of Chinese medicine. We have a lot of inquiries from China now, and some of these these medicines or these ingredients, these botanicals, possibly there's very little known about them. So much more research has to be done. It's quite a tough field.
I can imagine it's a tough world out there, going after multiple supplements from different countries and still being ahead of the game. I think the WADA punchline says it's play true. So you have to be true to the sport and, go on.
Imagine if it's so tough for the experts, how tough it is for the athletes out there to know which products are safe.
Yeah, this is confusing out there. And I think we can't just blame them because I think they want to go out there and play the sport, but they're inundated with a lot of things which gives them that extra edge to perform, right? So we have just 5 minutes left, so I don't want to take this conversation on. It's a very interesting subject, but I just wanted to touch on one more point with Abhijit, and then maybe we can have the closing thoughts from you. Dr. Abhijit, now that you mentioned that you have to consult a nutritionist, you have to look at the WADA list, which probably comes out every year in Jan, maybe look at Informed Sport or BSCG or NSF. Still, you always fall sick, right? I mean, athletes do fall sick. They are not machines, right?
Sure.
So if you can throw light on what the athlete should do, and also in a quick, maybe a couple of minutes, also talk about the therapeutic use exemption clause, which is there, which helps athletes whenever they have a real issue. That will actually, kind of give an overriding thought to this discussion.
Sure. Right. So your first point, the WADA prohibited list, it's impossible for an athlete. If the athlete falls sick and goes to a doctor, the doctor gives him a prescription. It's impossible for an athlete to know which medicines, how do they actually check those medicines in the WADA prohibited list. In fact, most doctors would even struggle to actually check for medicines, which ones are banned or not banned. So ideally, what I refer to is UK, US, and a few other countries, Canada, Australia, Japan, they have formed a base and they have a website which is Global DRO. So it's easier to check the salt. So anytime I get a query, obviously I'm not aware of which medicines are banned on the WADA prohibited list. But then what I do is whenever a drug query comes in, I usually go to Global DRO and check the ingredients to see whether they are prohibited or not prohibited, and then inform the athlete. And ask the athletes to, rather than calling me, send me a text message or even a WhatsApp message. So when I respond to them saying XYZ is not prohibited, you can take it, they have a written confirmation with them. So tomorrow, if they test positive because of that drug, they have that confirmation that Abhijit has confirmed to them. And I know, I think BCCI is the only organization in India, sporting organization in India, who has a dedicated anti-doping helpline. I doubt if any other sporting organization, even the Indian NADO, has a helpline to that for this cause. But besides cricket, whenever I have education workshops with other athletes, being an Indian, I would like to help all the Indian athletes. So I encourage, my numbers are there on the BCCI website as anti-doping helplines. So because India is in the top 3 doping lists, I mean, anti-doping cases, India is one of the countries with most number of cases, and I mean in the top 3. So I know a lot of these athletes inadvertently take some medicines which are prohibited. So as an Indian, I'm more than happy to receive calls or messages from all other non-cricketers as well who want to know whether the medicines they are taking, whether they are prohibited or not prohibited. I'll be there for them. Coming to your second point, therapeutic use exemption. A lot of these WADA prohibited medicines which athletes cannot take, it is possible that some of these medicines might be given to athletes for a legitimate illness. Just a simple example, we know insulin. Although insulin is present in our bodies, insulin is also given to patients who have diabetes. Now, insulin is prohibited on WADA's prohibited list. So if tomorrow an athlete suffers from diabetes and the doctor says you have to take insulin, then that athlete can apply to the National Anti-Doping Organization and has to submit documents, investigation reports, and a completed TUE, which is a therapeutic use exemption form, which will be analyzed by NADA's committee of experts. And if they feel that the athlete needs insulin to cure his diabetes, not to enhance his performance, then he will be given a therapeutic use exemption certificate for that particular drug, and the athlete can continue to take that medicine. So even after that, once an athlete has the TUE exemption, TUE certificate, and whenever he's tested, if they find that prohibited substance in his sample, he won't be penalized for it because that medicine has been given for a valid medical illness, not to enhance his performance.
Great comments, Abhijit, on that. We have actually run short of time. I don't want to extend this discussion further because I think all of you have to go to other things right now. Thanks, Dr. Abhijit, for also letting people know, the sports people know, that you are available to talk to, which is great. So, concluding thoughts from Terence. I mean, Terence, where do you see it happening? What's your concluding thoughts on this discussion?
Okay. I mean, I think it's been a very good discussion, Vijay, and I would encourage more discussions around the world like this. I think as a closing or passing statement, I'd just like to say to athletes and consumers of sports nutrition products and manufacturers and brands in India to look out for your athlete and your consumer. Make sure that the products you are providing are clean. Make sure that they have been tested and certified on a program like Informed Sport. The sports nutrition industry still has a bit of a bad reputation. With the help of Informed Sport and doctors such as Dr. Abhijit, then hopefully we can start changing things for the better. There is risk associated with it, but just make sure that you manage that risk, and hopefully then you'll be taking products in a safe manner.
Great thoughts, Terence. Dr. Abhijit, final thoughts from you on this discussion?
Well said by Terence. I mean, that's what I would repeat the same thing. Make sure you take an opinion of an expert on what supplements you're taking. Don't just blindly follow what your coaches or your support staff is telling you, and get the best opinion from the experts, and then take a call.
No, thank you, gentlemen, Terence and Abhijit, Dr. Abhijit. It was great for you having accepted to come online and spend your 1 hour interacting with all of us. So this telecast obviously goes on to the Fast&Up Facebook page and also the YouTube page. But this will also be live, I believe, or not live. It will be put up on the Facebook page for more time. So anyone who is seeing can actually go back and hear all the discussions, even in the future. We would also want to pass on this link to multiple people so that they get a good understanding of anti-doping and clean nutrition. We would love to have more such engaging talks on subjects like this later. I think age verification is something which I've really caught on, which is a great, interesting subject for me. But I would like to thank all of you again, and thank you for the time, and all the viewers. Happy having you here. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vijay. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Vijay. Thank you, Terence. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Abhijit. Bye-bye.
Bye.